No, because it's too big.
Yeah.
Like
The link.
the file it can't go
No,
into Discord.
that's not what I mean. I mean share the link.
Yeah, sure.
There. Here. I sent that's the link you gotta do, this one.
Wait, what?
Do you see it on the side? Do you see the comments or no?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wait,
That
what
that
the
is
hell?
that is the link that they'll watch through. Our link won't give them anything, I don't believe. All right, someone's here
Wait,
now.
wait, what?
We are the link to
What do you?
I'm saying the StreamYard link isn't what they watch it through
Oh,
YouTube.
yeah. I know. So wait, do you want me to send you the?
No, just send that in the Discord. That's all I want you to do.
Got it. Done.
Yes, okay. And then I am pulling up the Google Drive thing, but some people are jumping in. So yeah, we're going to be going over drafting from the 5 through 12 position. I'm doing an article. I have some data that's right here that'll be in the article. I have kind of just trying to get the right, I guess, setup, or like I don't even know, like the right way of putting things more or less for how I want to word it. I feel like I started the article and I was getting like in the weeds too much about like the economics of drafting, and I was like, this is just like sensitive, and like I probably sound like a fucking loser. So I just I just like stopped for a minute during work, and then I like came back to it. But I was trying to like go over the fact that like the replacement level of centers comparatively to other positions stuff, because I do think it's important to note that like the reason 1 through 4 is so valuable isn't because you couldn't possibly draft a player that could outscore, McKinnon, for example, or even really probably even McDavid in some sense. It's like there's a lot of wingers that in theory should all have a similar ceiling, while centers don't have that same, I think, situation, more or less. It's kind of like the beginning part. Do you think that's fair? Like, honestly, I could pull up the draft board quick too.
I mean, I think we'll get into it. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. I just think that the best four players in the league, by what happened last year and by what's projected this year, are centers. I still think, I think there's a wing tier or whatever. Like, I think there's tiers within wing the same way there are within center. I just think it just so happens that the four best projected players um, are at the center position, which sort of throws things, a little bit out of whack when you're talking about roster construction or whatnot. But I really don't want to get too far into things because I was trying to follow what you were saying. I don't know that I quite
Yeah,
followed it,
it's
but
okay. The PowerPoint you did is opening momentarily, but the point I guess I'm
yeah,
making, and let me pull it up again. I mean, based off our projections in some capacity as well, you're looking at just centers, right? So like the top tier of centers. I think that this cutoff to this next tier is a lot wider than it is at other positions. With defense, I feel like I could see the argument in defense. That you could say like I think Bakar and Yossi are infinitely, or not infinitely, but like a good clip better than the rest. I just think that there's so much wealth in this mid range that you could more than make up for it with peak weeks of Hamilton being like the guy that I keep thinking of. And I mean, you see my exposures to Burns and Hamilton and Werenski. Like those are the guys that I think in the vacuum of each week could end up very much peaking. And even really Cider, who I don't have enough of yet, but I want to get more of. But like I think there's reason to believe you can find a lot of useful weeks from defensemen comparatively to the replacement level of these guys where they're going. But at center, I don't think that getting a plethora of them in the like the late, really after, I'd say after Bergeron, that like you're gonna find anything near this. But we're gonna get into the strategy a bit more of like why you don't need to get crazy about it, and like don't go overboard and say like, all right, well now I missed out on the first four centers. I need to get 5 of them. Like I think that's the worst thing you could do, because I think you could more than make up for it by having a really, really strong two wingers and utility from the wing spot, who, as you can see, a lot of these guys are projected to have somewhat similar scores to that top tier of center. A little bit less. So you're saying like that tier of centers is still better than all these wingers, but I think you can make up that lost ground on these guys with, well, really two things. I'm getting a little bit. You have PowerPoint taking 7 years to load because I'm probably doing 150 things on this computer right now, all at once.
I think
A
it
couple
slowed
things.
down your entire machine. You just went
Can you hear me
robo
okay
mode
though?
on me for a little bit. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay,
You
I'm
just
trying
went
to
a little
exit
bit
though.
robot-y for a little. Is it? I mean, can I
Yeah.
share things? Is
Let
that
me.
easier?
I don't know how. Click it. Try it. Click share.
That, uh,
Yeah. I mean, while you're doing that, I'll wait for it. Just so you know, everyone, the rankings have been updated, but we have another update coming soon. But these are more or less updated. We are just trying to get. All right, yeah, you got it. So yeah, let me just
yeah.
exit out of trying to load this shit because
Okay.
it is taking up quite a bit. But the rankings are updated. Exposures are workable. If you have the draft caddy for any sport, you just have to do the same thing you do for for NFL. You grab your exposures, and when you put them in on the draft HUD, which I'll show you after, you just select NFL exposures, and it'll add the NHL ones. They both work the same. He's gonna rename it because of me. I'm pretty cool, pretty important. So
Okay. Well,
nothing on that.
I mean, no, I just kind of want to get into. Well, one, I'm trying to figure
Yeah,
out
let's get
how
into it.
to see. There we go. Just see what we're actually
It's up.
showing
Yeah,
to make sure it's visible. Um, yeah, I mean, so if you don't really know what we're talking about, I do suggest you go back and watch last week's whatever it was, 45 minutes or so. That's hosted via podcast at the Morningscape Pod. Apple, Stitcher, whatever. If you somehow need the link, just either go into Discord or go on Twitter and find us, or just DM one of us. DJ put his handle in the name, which I think is good. I should figure out how to do that myself. So yeah, anyway, or go back in DJ's YouTube streams to watch last week's, because last week we really set the stage for what is the general philosophy and what are the sort of things that you need to know before you start drafting. And one of those things, which again, we can probably show rather easily here, but I highly recommend you go back and actually look at it yourself, is that there's a vast difference in outcomes uh, purely based on where you're drafting. And again, this is all based on last year's data. Things will change this year. Things have changed this year from a roster or from a tournament structure standpoint or whatever. But really, what the important thing to know is that very much similar to the NFL, there's kind of like a top tier of 4 guys this year who project far better than the rest. They were the same guys from last year, and based on last year's data, you're far more likely to advance if you get one of those top 4 picks and therefore get one of those top 4 players. Easy enough, really easy to understand that. But I really suggest we dig into literally all of the stuff shown here last episode. So, I would strongly urge you to go back and sort of set yourself up with the overall mindset before we dig in a little bit deeper here. So, what the idea behind this show is okay, we know that it's an advantage to draft in the top 4. But what happens if I don't get a top 4 pick? Like, my money's already in. I'm not just going to get up and walk away from my laptop or my phone or chuck it in the nearest lake and say, well, I'll try again next draft. Like, no, you still need to, figure out a strategy to, uh, you know, optimize this draft and, make picks that are smart in this draft. So this is sort of the intro to what exactly we are going to be discussing. So, what happens when you get these picks? What we're going to show is a series of, I guess, PowerPoint slides, but basically a series of Excel tables that kind of break out the data into how does this how does this data set look among picks 1 to 4, and how does it look among the other picks in the draft. And so, as you can see, pretty quickly summarized on the left, the advance rates, it's about half. You're about half as likely to advance if you don't get one of those top 4 picks. So that's sort of the infrastructure we're working with here. So if the advance rate is about 15%, how do we get the best chance to move forward? And so Again, this is the first cut, but what we see is that generally speaking, DJ, you alluded to this. Let's look at the center position first. This is the third set of columns in the little chunks here. And like you said, even if you don't get one of the top centers, you still don't want to go all in on the center position. It's actually kind of crazy because last year we saw a majority of rosters out of picks 5 through 12 drafting 4 centers. Yet it was 3 percentage points lower than only drafting 3 centers in terms of advance rate. And that to me is pretty simple, and it's very much related to the concepts we were talking about on the original show, where you only get 1 center per week. And because it's a numbers game, you only get 16 draft picks. You need to figure out how to optimize, as such. And so then when you say, okay, well, we drafted 3 centers, how many wings should we take? Then you can see where drafting 7 wings is kind of like the quote unquote optimal solution for this problem. That's really, I don't know, DJ, if you have anything to add onto the centers and wings conversation there, but to me, it seems very straightforward.
Just a couple of notes, and someone just joined in. Basically, if you're just joining, we're just talking about if you're drafting between 1 and 4 comparatively to 5 through 12, a little bit of strategy. These are the numbers for who advanced to round 2. I think that, of the 15% that we're showing of advancement rate that went 5 through 12, which does that number actually make sense? I'm confused. Wait, round 2 advance, the picks 5 through 12 advance rate.
It's like how far did they advance to round 2? How many people advanced to round 2? Because the original because like the original was round 1, and then round 2, and then round 3, round 4.
Okay, it doesn't.
We don't have round 3 and 4 available because we don't know what team pick number it was in the raw data. So
that's what you're saying, right?
That's
what I mean. We don't know. We do know that only 3 teams had either Leon Draisaitl or McDavid. Matthews and McKinnon didn't advance at all to the finals. And the point that I kind of want to make is that if you are at a disadvantage with that 1 through 4 for getting to round 2, it does suck. But I feel like you're almost at a better advantage of having a very unique team than going forward, which could help you. So, not only do we want to get into this math, but one thing is just getting the best lineup. Now 3 instead of 2 teams are advancing. So having one of the best unique and correlated rosters that fits the best way to advance might end up being almost better off than getting that 1 through 4 pick, which I'm going to say it's probably not right to say it, but I think that you should not abandon, like you said, don't abandon a draft because you didn't get 1 through 4. I think it's even more than that. It's like, this is your chance to actually get a very, very unique roster. And the reason I say that is because if you get McDavid, you're not going to get Draisaitl. You could maybe get Evander Kane, but even that's been a bit of a stretch. You're not going to get great correlation. Same thing is about Draisaitl. If you get McKinnon, you're not going to get Makar. You're not going to get Rantanen. If you get Matthews, you're not going to get Marner. You're kind of missing that premium correlation. So you have a chance to really get yourself into a great spot in the final, I think, comparatively to those teams who have a better chance of moving on to round 2.
Yeah, we talked about this last week a bit. Yeah. I'm not totally worried about the uniqueness angle myself. There's just not enough teams for me to really worry about that. But, I do think getting, a guy like Kucherov, you get a better second round pick. Like that's just objectively true. So I think that has a small, little bit of advantage. But I think we're sort of, I would be short selling it to say, oh, you don't want a top 4 pick. Like, I think that's absolutely
I agree.
The absolute nuts.
You want a top 4 pick. You definitely want a top 4 pick. I totally agree. But if you don't get it, I'm saying that this is you should really be now being very, very strategic and have a plan going into this draft to be very ready to execute that plan, because you're at a disadvantage. How do you get yourself into that top 3 still in each of these rounds to then give yourself, like I'm saying, the top advanced players? One of them was Mitch Marner last year, and Mitch Marner was not available for you at the turn. So those top 4 picks, didn't get a chance to get him again. And valuable was because he just smashed round 3. So and it's going to take some luck, but there's a lot of guys that exist in that round window, that round 2 value window, that if you move on, keep them going, you're going to, you can have a chance to set yourself up. But as far as this is concerned, I just think that there's a lot of people that I've been watching the drafts and kind of keeping an eye on it today. And a lot of people that miss out on these top centers are going with 4 or 5, and you just should not do that.
It
Just
just it
no need.
Yeah, to me, I prefer wings anyway because most of the solid rate shooters later on in the draft are wings.
Yeah.
But it's just because you need to fill 2 every week. Like, they're just so much more important because you can get a flex from anywhere. You can get a flex from your second or third center. You can get one from one of your wings, but the wings counting for 2, it's just so important to make sure you have at least 7 wings, in my opinion. And again, my mindset has not changed. I will be drafting teams that are very strict to the 3-7-3-3 structure. I have not seen anything that takes me off of that. Before we move on, just one interesting thing looking at the top half of the screen, which we haven't really focused on. I find it funny because it's basically like do whatever the hell you want. If you got a top 4 pick, you're pretty much fine. There was really like no like, oh, you definitely shouldn't be doing this, that, or the other thing. You can see the drafting 5 centers wound up being it's just because of how bad a few of the guys like Kucherov were in the bottom half that I think picks 1 through 4, you just had this massive advantage over the rest of your draft, and it was really hard to screw that up, especially with 3 teams from most drafts advancing because of how many wild cards there were.
I just want to one note, and the only thing I'd say, that everything you said I agree with, but if you get to round 15, 16, and there is an absolute steal of a center that makes 4 centers, the thing you said about a 3-7, 3-3, it's not hard and fast. It's not like you just can't take a center. Like, don't go into this
For me,
thinking
it
like
is.
I'm abandoning all my other rules. Like, remember, I was in a draft that Bo Horvat was there in the 16th round. Never going to be here again. Probably he shouldn't be here. He's a good enough rate shooter on a team that 30 goal scorer. I grabbed the 4th center, and I don't do that often. I did it a little more at the start. I'm kind of for the Matt side now, but just don't abandon our principles for this. But definitely, I do think that the 7 wingers are going to make more sense.
Okay, and this is kind of reinforcing that point. Instead of looking at things cut individually by 3 centers versus 4 centers, whatever, this is taking the entire draft structure into account. Sample sizes aren't that high for the vast majority of these, but I do find it interesting that once again we see focusing in on the right side here. There's kind of 3 of the main builds. The main build being 3-3-3-7 as ordered up in the Excel columns. That was 19% versus an overall rate of 14%. And then we see these red, the red ones, what are below average. And pretty much all of those are just teams that didn't get enough wingers. And I think that's just, something that you need to stress is that it's really hard to make up the points that you're losing out at center by getting picks 5 through 12 without taking enough wingers to actually win the wing position. It seems pretty straightforward, but I think the data shows that very clearly. And then, you see some of these silly builds like a 5-5, 4 defensemen, 2 goalies has a 0% advance rate among 23 teams. Like, yeah, just don't do that. Like, it's pretty easy. Anything else here that you find interesting? I'm pretty sure this slide is very simple though.
Yeah, and this will be included in my article almost exactly. So don't worry if you can screenshot it, whatever, it'll be there. For the audio listeners, yeah, this kind of just proves what we already said before, that the 3-3-7 is really valuable. A 3-4 defenseman, the 3 goalie 4 defenseman, 3-6 was also pretty good, but only 67 teams. It's hard to know if there were some outliers in that mix. I really do think that that's the optimal build, and I think it's like you're saying, it seems so straightforward and simple, but you get in these lobbies and you're watching people take their 5th center, before it gets to, even the 14th round. And I'm just sitting there like, you are shooting yourself in the foot right now. Like, don't do this. Like, you don't need to try to, you're not going to make up a McDavid. Like, don't try to do that. Just try to pound this guy in 3 other spots, and your 2 wingers and your flex. You could beat him every single week and make up points that way. And I think it's just very intuitive and easy. The one, let's get to the next slide. I'm going to get ahead of myself.
Okay. So here again, something we covered in the last episode, of course, is just how important it is to not go overreaching for your various picks. This chart just sort of confirms that again for us. You really shouldn't be going off the board for a ton of your picks. If you do that, your likelihood to advance is just so low. And that's just a facet of the market is relatively efficient. You don't need to think that you don't need to reinforce how smart you are by going off the board so many times in a draft, because odds are, if you're high in a player and you draft them around their EDP, you'll be able to be above the field on them. It's just the way that math works. It's the way that the weakish competition works. Like, some of these guys are reaching for their favorite players.
Someone took William Buckland second overall today.
I mean, Mike Greer, thanks for playing on Underdog. I do look forward to William Buckland's season. But yeah.
It's the one that's going on right now, actually, while we're recording. So we might not get everyone in because they were like, we need one more to fill it. I'm like, well, I would do it, but we need like over 20 minutes. Like people are really dumb, and I think that's important to know. And like honestly, the number one thing I'd say overall in this slide and about reaching and value, like figure out the room you're in early. You should know. Okay, you'll know how smart this room is. You'll be in some rooms with one idiot, two idiots, zero idiots, and you realize everyone is correlating very heavily, and you already have two Boston guys. Maybe not jump up and take that third one. Like I've waited. I had that happen to me yesterday. I think yesterday, and I waited on McAvoy. I got him like 10 after ADP because I'm like, no one's gonna take him without any other Boston guys. I can get him next round, and I got him. Like, take that risk, especially if you're doing 150 like me. It makes a lot of sense.
And about reading the room you're in, see if any of the guys you're drafting with are trying to live stream the draft as well, because they might do things like auto draft Max Pacioretty.
Someone took him 62 in a draft I was in today, so just grabbed him like 20 above ADP. Just had to get him.
Dude, he watched your stream and he loved the argument you gave for why he could be that differentiator.
Yeah. My argument was that in the 16th round, you can draft him, and I'm not saying it's the worst idea in the world. Like, I think there's an argument there. It's kind of like the same argument right now with like Deshaun Watson, except like it depends on when he comes back, but it kind of, it's like Max Pacioretty is legitimately could be a guy that would be like a top 50 ADP if fully healthy. So it's like, what is his value in the playoffs? It's pretty big, and he's going to go undrafted a lot now. I don't know, but yeah, we can move forward.
Yeah, and this slide, I honestly sort of debated whether to include it or not, because so much of this is dependent on the players that went around those certain ADPs. Like, I'm pretty sure Cale Makar was, a guy who went in the back end of the second. Am I wrong? Or maybe early third?
I have it up. Cale Makar's ADP for all the listeners. Oh man, I have it up right now too. How am I not seeing him this fast? Where the heck is
Maybe he went late. I honestly don't know. But
I'm pretty sure 19.73 was his average.
So 19.3, that would put him, mid to late, and so that's probably on the left half of the slide you're looking at. Which, that's sort of why the on picks 1 through 4, the center, defenseman, winger, it didn't really matter who the winger was. If you drafted one of those great centers and then Cale Makar, yeah, it makes sense. You have a 46% advance rate to the playoffs. So that sort of stuff applies, obviously, on a slightly smaller scale to the picks 5 through 12 as well. But I did find it relatively interesting just how varied the approaches could be. It's not like taking a wing first is always the best move, or wing second or whatever, or where to draft the center even. Like, there's multiple ways you can go. So I think my takeaway is not to worry too much about who you're actually taking, which might be silly, but it's also like, I think the construction matters more than like the actual specific players, and how you start your draft early should inform how it goes late, not necessarily who you pick in the first round should dictate who you pick in the second round. I think I prefer to pick different positions, with those 3 picks. but I don't think that's a hard and fast rule. And I could actually see myself drafting a lot of wing starts
Yeah, no.
off the bat.
And I think the more drafts you do, the more you should play with it. And like I said,
For sure.
I probably right up. Like I'm gonna have some Barkov, Matt the Chuck starts at the turn, but when I can get it right, I'm not gonna shy away from that early correlation. I'm not gonna force it either if I don't have to. But I do think ADP is getting a lot sharper already. I think that it is. I'm not gonna try to toot our horn too much, but the rankings we put out have really started to take hold and put where the ADP is going. It's kind of crazy how correlated it's becoming. So, I do think we're getting a bit sharper. And at this point, I don't think that there's anyone in the top 20 that's like a reach by any stretch at this point. So, you can play around with it, but I wouldn't force and I've seen it. Like I was actually the other day, I had the turn and I was like, all right, this will be the Chuck Barkov, and someone grabbed him at like 9. Don't force a player just because you should still Ovechkin and Pasternak are right there. Like I didn't get it. I was like, you just shouldn't do that. But that's just don't force that in there anywhere, and don't and just more to the point about Florida. I mean, they have a really bad playoff schedule. But I'm not avoiding them because of that. I still think you can play them, but I kind of keep that in mind.
Yep, and we can also, if there's any questions or thoughts you guys have, feel free. We'll discuss them in a little bit. This is actually the last little bit of data that we have. So
someone asked us what's up. So I mean,
well,
they get one question.
We'll get to them after the show or after after the slide. So this one I think is the most important. Again, this is probably worth refreshing based on either the I guess last week's show, because I don't think this stuff made it into your article. I don't think I had this stuff by the time you finished your article.
I didn't put this in.
Okay.
No, I'll put it in the next one.
So go watch that. We talk about the investment and the different theories as to why that's relevant and how we came up with it. But basically, if you assign every draft pick a value, the same way the real draft does, the first overall pick is worth much more than the 20th pick, which is only worth slightly more than the 30th pick or whatever, that sort of same sliding scale of valuing picks. You can sort of summarize each team by the amount of investment they had in each position throughout your draft. And so what I find really interesting about this particular data set is that when you look at the bottom half, which for the podcast people is picks 5 through 12, you had by far the most success by investing very lightly in the center position. That's not meaning to say you can't have success if you draft, 3 centers relatively early. But I think it does speak somewhat to the idea of, you're taking the loss at the center position. You're basically needing to win at wing in order to make up for it, because that's where the majority of points are coming from. A goalie, a defenseman could make or break your season, but given how closely clumped those positions are and how you can only start one goalie a week specifically, that's not likely to be able to give yourself enough of a separation gap to sort of overcome not having an Austin Matthews, assuming he plays the full season, or McDavid or whoever. And so that's the first one, where the lowest bucket you have a 20% advance rate, and that's actually the most heavily, I guess, counted in bucket. So I guess one main takeaway is try to invest a relatively little in the center position, which also goes along the lines of our do not pick 4 to 5 centers just because you have a quote 0 center build. That's not really, that's not really translatable based on the data we have from football. And then at the wing position, you just gotta get wings. If you invest very little in wings, you're just gonna lose. There's no way around that. So many teams tried it last year. Almost 250 teams tried drafting very few wings after missing out on those top centers. They advanced at a 7.5% rate. That's half of what's already half of, picks 1 through 4, 30%, picks 5 through 12, 15%. Lowest wing investment, 7.5%. You might as well donate your money. You might as well throw your phone in the lake.
I believe they
It's not
say you
smart.
just paid the rake, is what they say
Yes, yes,
on the
you
street,
just paid
on
the
the main
rate.
streets. Yeah, no,
And
I
so,
totally, yeah, no. The thing is like it's so easy to invest in wing high. It's not like there's no
yeah,
barrier to entry on that. Like it's right
yeah,
there for you, and it's not like
yeah,
you're
yeah,
jumping way ahead of ADB to do it. Like it's right there. There
yeah.
is a bit of a wing dead zone, and that is when you're getting into like the middle low. There's a bit of a wing dead zone. Not early on in the draft.
Mm-hmm. And then just sort of the cap off this section here, looking at goalies. I find it a little bit interesting that when you picks 1 through 4, if you invested a lot in goalies, you had a higher advance rate. Whereas if you didn't have picks 1 through 4, you kind of just needed to not spend a ton or way too little in net to have the best odds of moving on. I don't know what to ascribe that to, honestly. But I think that sort of does fit my general, 3-7-3-3 build yet again. And then maybe interesting is defense investment also being relatively low. It's not a huge difference. The shading makes it stand out a bit more than it probably should. Um, but as long as you're not, drafting 5 defensemen or whatever, you're probably doing okay. But I just think the takeaway for me looking at this was just how staggeringly obvious it is. And, anything can be obvious when it's shown to you, but the ability to be cognizant of it while you're drafting, I think is just really important. Um, and so having this mindset of like, okay, I know I need to win the wing position. If that's your guiding light going into the drafts where you don't get a McDavid, a Matthews, a McKinnon, or a Draisaitl, you're probably 90% of the way there already toward maximizing your competitiveness in said draft. And so hopefully every draft you get McDavid or Matthews and you never have to worry about this. But we all know that's not how math works. And so I think that's really the main thing that I have is just if you don't get one of those guys, win the wing position. There's all this data here to sort of back that up. And yeah, so did anything else before we stop sharing and we do whatever else you had on your mind for the next little bit?
Yeah, I mean the only thing I was gonna ask you, I'll kick off the question portion.
Yeah, sure.
So with what we're saying here, this year's a little bit different with the top. Last year there was only the first defenseman that was going was Makar at the 16 or the 19 mark we mentioned. I mean, this year this
Mhm.
is not the same. I mean, Makar is going around the 6 ADP mark. I believe his ADP right now, I have it up, is 5 actually. So he's really going more at the 5th. Are you like Jesus? Are you taking him at 5, or are you trying to get him at 7 or 8, or like what's your plan with Picard?
Um, Honestly, my plan is to have no Kale McCarr. I honestly don't even know if that's true at this point. I
I
can
have a
check that right now. But
I have a lot of Kale McCarr, and I'm probably gonna start to get off of it a little
to
bit. And
me, um,
I was getting it before
like,
he got this high, but now he's
sure.
5. I have took him a couple times at 5, but I'm kind of done with it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that absolutely makes sense. I'm totally willing to believe that this guy is just a total outlier in terms of one, the team he's on being absolutely incredible, and two, the player he is being just like this, this guy who can challenge 30 goals a season, and we don't really have a defenseman in the league who can do that. Um, but man, it's not even like he's this massive, like block shots volume guy. It's sort of one of those things where if he's not replicating exactly what he was last year, which made people go, "Oh, is he the best player in the NHL like since or the best defenseman since Bobby Orr or whatever?" Um, I don't think he pays off that ADP because the thing is, we've talked about this, last week, and I think you even mentioned it earlier. There's so many good defensemen available late in drafts, in that there's just not as many good centers or good wings available late in the drafts relative to those defensemen, in my opinion. And so I just think I build better teams when I'm not spending a top 10 pick on a defenseman. I get that build around center or wing, and I can more easily correlate with that as well. So that's sort of my like specific case of why I'm not drafting Kale McCarr. But I honestly don't know that I'll have much of Roman Yossi either, for very similar reasons. I just don't know how likely it is that he replicates what he did last year. And what he did last year, I don't even know if that's enough to sort of uh, make up for the fact that I'm just losing out on such a valuable forward who's just an incredible fantasy player. Because all these dudes going super early are just, they're great. You want all of them. So to me, it's sort of an easy decision to fade defensemen very early on for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, but the reason why, I mean, this is actually a little bit higher than I think it is now. I was already high on Kaprizov because early on I was taking him well above his original 30 whatever ADP. So I was trying to be like, all right, well, I guess I'll take a couple shares of Makar. I only have, I think it's only 6 teams, and I have a ton that haven't come through yet, and I don't have a lot in those. I kind of look through them. I'm a little bit higher than I'd like to be on him. I don't think it's quite worth the 5. I've taken him there. I kind of go back and forth a little bit because I want exposure, because I know you're saying like, well, what if he doesn't? And we're talking about like a 23-year-old, 24-year-old defenseman that's on the best team in the league that sees all the minutes and has amazing rates in every category. Like, okay, he takes a bit of a step back and only has 800 fantasy points and still is incredibly valuable. Like, we look at Yossi, it's like, is he going to repeat almost 900? I highly doubt it, but like, what is leading you to him not, other than like, did Nashville take a step back? I don't know, maybe. I don't think it's going to be a massive step back, and he's still going to see the same role of healthy. Whereas like those two, I can see drafting a bit. I mean, you see this range is completely dead for me outside of a few Ekblad teams that are just correlation kind of factored in. And I just think Ekblad is actually like a fine pick around the 45 mark where I've been taking him comparatively. Like, I think he's the best, and our rankings show, like, I think he's the best defenseman in this entire range is Ekblad. If fully healthy on that Florida team that shoots the Everly Digley out of the puck, with that power play being what it is, I like him more than the rest. So what I'm looking at is like, if I don't draft one of these two, which I don't have a ton of Yossi, I'm kind of fading the entire range. And then I'm getting very heavy on Burns and Hamilton. And the reason being is if they're healthy, I think that they are just as good, if not better than anyone else in this range below Yossi.
Yeah. So 100%. Like, the 2v2s, I guess we could say, of a Burns and, I don't know, let's say Pasternak. Burns and Pasternak against a, Cale Makar and who's available around Brent Burns at wing. What is he, 60 something?
Brent Burns is let's pull together. So Line A, Rust. Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Yeah. So like a Line A or Rust or Thompson and Makar versus like a Pasternak and Burns. To me, that's very heavily weighted toward like the stud wing side. So that's kind of my guiding light through all of this. I'm happy to be wrong. I'll make it up in DFS hopefully if Kale McCarr, has one of those seasons again. But it's just, it doesn't feel right to me to be spending that much on the defense when there's so many good defensemen available, mid-tier, late. I know the Discord has kind of let the secret out on Erik Karlsson now, so every draft I was in, I think I had a 5 out of 6 in the first 6 drafts I did in like the 150s, 160s range. Now he's a bit tougher to pick up, but just guys like that where it's like, you need to sort of need some things to go right for them, but it's not out of the. It doesn't seem surprising at all to me if you say, X defenseman who's going as defenseman 40 or defenseman whatever Karlsson is 31. It wouldn't be 31. Surprising for them to be a top 5 D-man this year, and I just don't think that's true about the other positions.
The case for Erik Karlsson is so easy. It's if he's healthy, he is definitely a top 10 defenseman because he's going to play every useful minute that they have, and
he was so good last year before he got hurt. He was like I think I even heard Ryan Lambert make a joke about it on like the most recent Puck Soup or something. But he literally was back, and then he got hurt like 2 weeks later, and it was so sad. And maybe that's just who he is from now on. But I'm willing in a format like this where you're taking $10 to try and turn it into $10,000. I'm willing to take that chance in, not the super majority, but whenever I get the opportunity, I'm happy to be double, triple, quadruple the field on a guy like that, given the price and everything else. So,
Because every player would have to project to be healthy. We can't project them not to be healthy. What would the point be, right? So let's just project him to be healthy. He is a top 10 defenseman going 31, and you aren't drafting him thinking like, oh, what if he doesn't? Like, you're drafting him because of the upside. And then I love, I mean, obviously he's one of my highest owned players at 23%, and I have more coming in because of the end of the drafts I was in now, where his ADP wasn't even all the way updated. But just really quickly, what I was trying to do, if I could squeeze it out, 50 games played, he had 336 points. You had another 30 games to that mix. I mean, people are pulling up this stats from last year and being like, how much are we not taking this guy here? He's missed so much time. He was so valuable, and and they lose Brent Burns. Like, he's now the power play %. He's going to be the guy, for this team.
Yep.
That
he's the guy who gets those softballs. What's that?
Yeah. Oh, by the way, anyone comment any questions over in the side while we're doing this? While we're on the topic of we kind of went position by position, but we didn't ever mention goalie. And I know we hate goalies. I'll just pull up my exposures for everyone to see. I have no Vasilevsky yet. He just continues to go before I'm going to take him.
Interesting.
I don't know if it's just the drafts I keep getting in. I've been interested. I've had a draft where I'm like, all right, screw it. I'm getting my first Vasilevsky share. Let's do it. And he just always is going before ADP in my drafts I'm in. So I haven't gotten the right one. I only got one share of Igor so far. And I think that's even true with all of the other drafts I'm in right now. I think I only have one. I've been a lot more bullish on Demko, really all of this range, not as much obviously with Fleury. And Campbell's another guy that seemingly goes before the others. And I like Jack Campbell. I think he's in a really good spot with Edmonton, but I like Demko a lot more. And when I can get Demko, and I feel like I come between these two a lot. It's like I'm taking Demko every time. I think he's going to see more starts than Campbell moving forward. But is there any? And the thing about Bobrovsky, if you're looking at this and you're wondering, his name just isn't spelled. We fixed it, but it's not in the rankings yet. But his name was not spelled the same we had it. I don't even know what we had, but we fixed it now, so it will come forward. And I'm a little bit actually more bullish on him. I got some top secret source that was actually 100%. I'll tell Matt after this. I don't think he heard me last time. I said it with the one person that was in here last time. Top secret, incredibly reliable source that said that he might play a little bit more than maybe that some are projecting. Not a ton more, but I'm giving him a little bit of a boost based off this information. Not a ton. I'm not I don't think he's better than Ottinger still, and I think that he's this range is so good for him. But at 62 ADP, I think he might be a little bit of you might want to consider him. And I'm kind of not taking as much tonight. So for the 5 people watching and whoever listens to the podcast, I gave away a little bit of a secret. The goalie that I'm the highest on at the end is Carter Hart, and I know the argument that can be made against him. It's incredibly easy to say Philadelphia is a dumpster fire and their defense sucks, but I'm kind of looking at that the other way and saying, okay, their defense is bad. His peak weeks are going to be just as good of peak weeks as a lot of these goalies up here, where if he wins, he starts 4 games or something and wins 3 of them, he's going to have crazy big wins with a ton of saves. And, those weeks might not happen that often. It might only happen 3 times or twice. Those are going to be 2 peak weeks for my third goalie, comparatively to these other third goalies that I'm praying to get 2 good weeks from when they only get so many starts. You're praying for the couple shutouts they get that are going to get you there. I think his path to having more usable weeks at ADP is just higher than everyone else in this range. Is there any goalie that you want to mention that you're a bit higher on, lower on, or do you just hate goalies?
I mean, no, I talked about this last time. I think goalies are probably the position I'm valuing most after wing when it comes to who do I want to fill up my roster with first. because I literally think there's only about a dozen goalies who I view as like actually reliable as far as like bankable workload, gonna get, 55, 60 starts if everything goes right for them, versus these, 1A, 1B type situations where I could easily see it being 48 to, how does the math work there? 34, and neither guy is all that valuable in the long run. Um, so I guess I have 11 drafts done. I'm nowhere near the level of insane that DJ is here, but the two guys that I have 3 of 11 right now are Elvis and Marc Andre Fleury, and those feel like bit different of price ranges, but I think those are guys that I'll continue to pick up if they're
Why
around
Elvis? You think
ADP.
Elvis is gonna just dramatically play more games than Corpusalo? You think they'll trade Corpusalo? Like,
I think it's more likely that Elvis runs with the net, and I also just think it's more likely that Columbus is competitive than the majority of these other sort of like 1A ish type goalies. Yeah, I know you just starred Jake Allen
yeah,
because the Carey Price news that just came out
yeah.
is
I have faded Carey Price. I said it from the first time I said anything about Best Puck. I said I
you
am
did.
not. There's no way I'm taking Carey Price. He's not gonna play this year. I didn't have any like. I just like very like he kind of said he wasn't going to. I thought he was the one that said that. So I was like, all right. But yeah, no, Jake Allen is the guy now at the end of drafts. I've been drafting Vanacek because I just think that the Devils have given up on Blackwood. I just don't think he's going to be there. And you're looking at this team that's like, all right, well, they have Bernier and Blackwood. Maybe they steal some starts. They gave this guy a 3-year contract for a reason. I think this is an improved team. I think that Vanacek isn't terrible. That's kind of been the guy that I've been like, could he end up getting 50 plus starts? Like, that's the guy I think that could do it. He's not a lot of wear and tear on him, whether it is with Bernier. I think he's kind of cemented as the backup, and Blackwood is just dust at this point. So that's kind of been the guy I've been drafting late. I'm very high on Gibson. I think it's actually my highest owned goalie because you could talk me into a backup there being like somewhat useful, but I think that if you get back to that Gibson that we know exists within him, and this team is improved, it is just game over for Gibson at ADP. Like, who is his? I mean, Stellares or it's that goalie Dostal, right? They still
Yeah.
have Dostal, but yeah,
Yeah,
I just
I think he's a really good prospect actually.
yeah, but he just doesn't seem. I don't think he's quite there yet, but we'll see. I have been drafted high on Gibson because again, like I feel like if John Gibson is the guy that like I'm drafting him thinking like what's his peak, and his peak is probably literally a top 5 goalie in the league. If he is smashing and they're winning, it's because of him, and he's going to be back to himself. Can he get back to himself? Can he get back to the old John Gibson that we haven't seen in a few years, right? I mean, we haven't
Yeah.
seen it, but
Hmm.
like I mean,
Yeah.
look at that 20
I think
team.
I think I'll
That's
have
what we're if we can get back to there. That's kind of what we're looking for. It's like if he gets back to this again because the team's improved and he's committed and he's back and he's ready to go, or if he gets traded. I mean, it's not like it's completely out of the realm. If they're losing it early in the year, he gets moved somewhere else, finds himself, in Colorado, for example, which I don't know how they pull off, but they seem to pull it off anyways. That's kind of that. And then
How are you handling Vegas?
well, I'm drafting a lot of them, honestly. I mean,
I mean, as far as the goalies there are,
well, yeah, you can see I have just not been like wanting to pay for Logan. Like, I just think Brossoit is the guy. Like, I don't see why people have talked themselves into Logan Thompson. Like, Brossoit was hurt and he started. It wasn't like he started over Brossoit. I think that he's the starter. So I'm grabbing him at the end of drafts thinking that but I don't think he's going to get more than 45, 50 starts, but
right. I think the bull case for Logan Thompson is that Brossoit is, I think, confirmed to miss the first month of the year. Some sort of
I
hip
don't know if that's confirmed,
procedure.
but yeah.
But I think the sort of bull case there is that Thompson gets the first few weeks or whatever in goal, and that Vegas is as good as they should be on paper, just because turns out having really good players still matters, even if you have to give away some good players to make that happen. And I think the fear is Vegas goes 5-1-1 to start the year, and all of a sudden it's like, yeah, like Laurent Brossoit's a nobody. and that Thompson
Plural.
just sort of gets the net by default. But
His
that to
first
me
name
is sort
not
of an interesting
bad.
situation because they should both theoretically, I think, be going where the Boston guys go. And I believe both Boston guys go before those two do, which is interesting considering, uh, they even gain Bruce Cassidy as their coach and Boston loses Bruce Cassidy as their coach. So
Ahead of schedule, but likely won't be ready for opening night. Okay,
yeah.
so yeah. I mean, that's kind of what I was assuming as
Yeah.
well.
Okay.
I mean, I like you're saying, like I'm not taking Bristol. I mean, the 7.7% I have for Swa
Mm-hmm.
are 7.7% of drafts where I've already taken Soros or another one of those guys, and I'm thinking like those guys start the year out like one of these guys here. I'm grabbing them, and then I'm grabbing Bristol at the end, thinking
Yep.
like if he does, he'll have usable weeks. But
For sure.
yeah, definitely gonna get more Jake. What were you gonna say?
Grab the most recent comment. There we go. Yep, that's it. Yeah, that's actually a really good point because that does sort of shake things up. I think, obviously from a correlation perspective, but also I'm pretty sure we were just expecting Kadri to go to the Islanders. And, no disrespect to the greatness of Lou Lamoriello, but the Islanders really stink.
Yeah.
Like when they were good, it was because defense and their power play was just garbage. And was Nazem Kadri really going to go off there? I don't know. So I think to me that means that Kadri's ADP should rise. I don't think he's showing up yet on Underdog
No,
as
he's not. No,
on Calgary yet. What's his
I can
ADP
mention it.
currently? Yeah. Well, what's his ADP right now?
Oh, it went up a bit.
84. Yeah.
Which I think that's right. I think it should go up. Like I think he's I wouldn't say he should be about 70. Holy crap, there's only 4
where's
more
Lindholm?
spots now.
I'm in there, so maybe after we close the pod, we can stay live here if anyone wants to draft with us or whatever. Or if you gotta go.
I don't. Yeah, I'm gonna go. I don't want to stay alive.
But anyway, Lindholm is going what 20, 25 spots earlier.
Yeah.
So that to me seems like there's a little bit of room for Kadri to close that gap. I think getting him earlier is definitely getting him now as your exposure versus getting him in say a month. I think there'll be very different prices on it. So I think Kadri's obviously for this year a good fit in Calgary. Slide Backlund down to the third line where he probably should be playing at this stage in his career, and or kick out Lindholm to the wing. I have no idea what they're actually going to do, but it doesn't hurt. The power play should be pretty good.
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest reason why I prefer him in fantasy now going to Calgary over the Islanders is because we just know that they're going to roll him out there 20 minutes a night. They're going to give him the maximum amount of offensive exposure. Whereas I just don't think that we don't really know what the Islanders are going to do. They obviously changed coaches, which was ridiculous in its own right. But like I now know that this team is going to be very predicate on getting him the right offensive exposure. And the one thing that I kind of took away, I think about a little bit, which might not be that important because I think they'll all see some role, is like Toffoli, Mangiapane, Lindholm, Kadri. It's starting to get to the point where it's like how many kind of shooting chefs are in the kitchen. I think the Mangiapane stuff's a little bit blown out of proportion. It's not like he's an incredible rate shooter. Toffoli a little bit higher, but he's not even that incredible. But like, is this starting to I think this is going to rise or raise, Huberdeau's ADP, and I'm not sure if I'm there with that. Like, I don't think I'm going into it. And again, this is just a principle that you should follow in all drafting for every sport is just, don't go into a draft thinking I want to start getting Calgary exposure now. And then forcing yourself into drafting Huberdeau at 18 to then get Kadri later to force this stack that you think is other people are going to do that too. So taking them when they fall to you, taking them at the right time, I think is important, and not thinking I have to have this specific exposure, this specific correlation, because we really don't know what's going to happen there.
Is that background a filter? Are you in a basement? Of course I'm in a basement, buddy.
That's actually
we're talking about
couch.
We're talking about
for
daily
that.
fantasy sports in, underdog best ball strategy in the middle of August when hockey season starts for 2 months. Of course, I'm in a basement, buddy. Actually,
I
right there is a blanket with my cats on it. It's like a picture of the cats made into a blanket.
yeah,
It's like my most prized possession.
Matt is very into his cats. I'm in my office slash spare bedroom where I still have all of my concert posters that I like put into frames and I haven't hung up, and I moved in almost a year ago, so I'm doing great. And I have my tuck jersey I put on here, so it had some nice aesthetic.
Nice. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Are we live until 10? Is that what your plan was?
Nope. I'm done to leave whenever, but look at this jersey.
Oh,
Look
okay.
at this. Are we even looking at this?
But
Are you kidding?
that's great, DJ.
It's so nice.
Okay, well, if we have whatever, if there's any specific spots, I'm sure we can talk about those. But otherwise, I think we can cut the podcast here and whatever else.
Yeah.
So I just want to reiterate,
We're gonna be
if
2 more to the
if you
draft.
yeah, so if you missed if you missed the first 20 minutes or so, we went over some pretty specific data on drafting out of the 1 through 4 versus 5 through 12 spots. Feel free, if you were listening to the podcast, to go find DJ's stream of this to see those sort of to see those pictures, basically to see those data tables yourself. And check that out. Also, be sure you go back and watch last week's, watch it, listen to it, whatever, I don't care, where we go through DJ's article that he wrote up about some of like the very initial data that we have. And then be sure to follow us on all social media. The podcast itself is at One Escape Pod. I am at Fake Moods, and DJ is at DJ_Mitchell94. All of that will be in the podcast description as well. So
we will. I just want to really quickly. Next week we're not doing a Thursday show. I won't be here. I'll be I'll be in Cape Cod actually on the 25th, and then the 26th I'll be at Martha's Vineyard, I guess, for a music festival, and I'll be back on the 30th. So you're gonna get like a full week without me in the draft lobbies, which is why I'm kind of barbelling this, because I'm not bringing my laptop. I'm kind of unplugging for a few days before I'm gonna get my 150 in on DraftKings for the NFL, and then I'll probably be at the 50-60 mark for hockey, and then I'll come back on the 30th to get grinded again. So we'll probably be back on the 1st in that range before football starts, and then as soon as football starts, the content will be probably a bit heavier. Our goal is to get it filled fast. We're already ahead of what I would think was ahead. I mean, it's not like I kind of posted about it. We're not at the same interval of days, but we're pretty close. Like the percentage I think we're at like the 18% of the way from like best ball starting to the regular season. And it's at like 14% full right now. I don't think that's that bad though. I mean, Eagles literally told me he hasn't done a single one of his 150 yet. So we have a lot of the guys that are just jamming football. The day that I was trying to push as much hockey content as I could and not content, just getting drafts filled, was the day they launched the Pomeranian on me. I was like, I was so whatever. It's just the way that it goes. So we got to get through this football season before I think it really takes off.
Yeah. So, and I think, so like you said, maybe in 2 weeks, some of the stuff we'll cover are maybe some specific player take type stuff. If there's other sort of macro level thoughts or things that we've like gleaned on, but haven't necessarily, done a deep dive into, feel free to let us know. But I honestly think the stuff we've covered just in the hour and a half of talking about it between this show and the last show, should be more than enough to sort of really make sure that you're on the right track as far as how to draft and whatever else. We can sort of start digging into some of the specifics, some of our favorite, say, late round flyers or some of our like major fades as we get more drafts and everything. I think those will kind of be the sorts of content we start churning out. And then, of course, doing some live drafts when they fill with a bit more regularity. So with that, I mean, looks like this draft is about to cross.
Yeah, my fingers are so crossed I'm going to be able to get on bowls. They have invited me, so I might be end up doing one live on bowls. That's true. That's the dream. They said they were going to invite me, and I told them I'd come on any time, and they said okay. So I mean, if we do a live draft with Pete and Brian, that would be very, very fun. I don't know if both of us could get in on that, but that would be
you have fun. I'll go on when I win the fantasy hockey world championship this year.
Okay, yeah. Let's get to this live draft. Enjoy it. Enjoy a little bit of the summer that's left. Matt, you know what to say.
Yeah. So thank you all for tuning in and sitting with us for an hour here. From Doug, from DJ, from myself. Have a good best ball draft season, everyone, and we will see you.